thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here. It's honestly an honor to share our transformational story with you and represent all the work of our team back at the headquarters in Dallas and all of our team members across the country. Today I'm joined by Lindsay Morgan. So Lindsay, why don't you give your quick intro? I'm going to find the clicker because I'm already messing up the logistics. There we go.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. I'm Lindsay Morgan. I'm the CMO of Pizza Hut US. I've been with Yum for 6 years, and I've been in the CMO role here for 2 years. And it's been such a fun treat to work on a brand because who doesn't love pizza, number one? And then number two, it's a great family, iconic brand. And so I'm a mom, I have 2 young kids. It was a big part of my growing up, and it's an honor to steward that forward for the next generation.
That is true. When you're a parent that works on a pizza brand, you're usually winning. So
oh, yeah.
I have the same thing in my house. So I'm David Graves, I'm the president of Pizza Hut in the US. And look, we're gonna try and have some fun up here today. I think it's gonna be fun. You can see from our video, we like to have a good time. This is my first time presenting next to a disco ball, so it's definitely gonna be fun.
It's my third time,
Your
so
third
I'll help you.
Well, that's because you're a CMO and I'm an ex-marketer turned general manager. So, okay, so let's jump in. We should get going. I should just tell you now, this is new content. I don't like slides that build, and we have a lot of builds, so buckle in. We're gonna see what happens, but it's gonna be good. So here's our roadmap, right? So we're gonna do, kind of take this in 3 parts. And we're gonna talk a little bit about this idea of how do we transform Pizza Hut. And I wanna talk a little bit, just pull back for 1 second on like why is transformation really important? And one of the things that I picked up this morning, I really enjoyed the industry panel. And one of the things that was pretty clear to me as I listened to that is, hey, there's gonna be a lot of change. We don't exactly know how it's gonna play out, right? And the thing that I'll tell you is we're gonna talk about transforming towards our North Star. And I think when you have a clear North Star, when you have a clear compass about where you're trying to go, they can help you manage through that uncertainty. Not gonna make it easier, but I think we can, with a clear North Star, with a clear direction of where we're going, we can start to manage through that uncertainty. So we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about how we found that for Pizza Hut. Then we're gonna talk about some guiding principles, and we're gonna phrase them as 5 questions that I think can be relevant for all of you as you think about how do you transform your brand, the things that you're working on. We'll talk about that and some principles that we use inside Pizza Hut, because we're always improving, we're work in progress. So how do we think about the transformation journey that we're always on, right? And as we do that, as we go through it, we'll talk a little bit about how we're transforming Pizza Hut and some examples just to bring those to life, okay? That's what we're gonna do. So before we go too far, I'm gonna pull back and just kind of give us the quick rundown on Pizza Hut, right? Pizza Hut, America's most loved pizza company, started in Wichita, Kansas by 2 brothers that got a loan from their mother, the Carney brothers. It's a true entrepreneurial story. They had 1 store that they started in Wichita, and they built it to over 6,500 stores in the US and many, many more stores globally. So how does that happen, right? Like why are they able to build a brand from 1 store to a big national brand? And it's because they stood the test of time by innovating and staying close to their customer, staying close to their team member, staying close to the culture that they're operating in. So if you think about Pizza Hut's known for pan pizza, where does pan pizza come from? It comes from, hey, delivery is starting to spin up. What are we gonna do with delivery? How are we gonna have a great pizza that can get delivered? Well, it's gonna have to be thicker. It's gonna have to stand up to the delivery process. So we should invent pan pizza. So they're always thinking about and innovating against customer needs so that they could deliver their point of difference as a brand, which was really all about craveable food. Right, so they built that business into about a $5.5 billion business with about 6,500 stores in the US. So let's take a quick run back. I'm gonna take a quick video here and just show you how Pizza Hut has innovated over the last 60 years, and then we're gonna talk about how we're gonna innovate for the next 60 years.
Here's to Pizza Hut, celebrating 60 years under one roof. Here's to original pan, to stuffed crust, and tomorrow's...
What will they think of next?
Here's to the big New Yorker, Bigfoot Pizza, and inspiring us all to read with Book It. Here's to every night feeling like Friday, and to breakfast the next morning. Here's to the first online pizza order.
Pizza.
Here's to the place we grew up, and the pizza right fielders still love today. So raise a slice to another 60 years, and all the ways no one out-pizzas the Hut.
So how many people, when you see that, how many of you have a memory of Pizza Hut? Like most hands go up, right? And whenever I ask people that, they tell me some positive story about their time at Pizza Hut, right? And pizza in general. Pizza is a food that brings people together. And so we have this pleasure of figuring out how do we continue to make pizza a food that everybody comes around and enjoys and keep it modern. You know, one of the things that you see in that video is Pizza Hut innovated over the last 60 years, right? And we talked about this morning. You know, we're in an uncertain environment. The pace of change is faster than ever before. And I think you would have heard that in the State of the Industry talk. And the thing that I will tell you is, I'll kind of I hear some people say sometimes, hey, it was COVID, it really ramped up, it broke every offline habit, it ramped up the pace of change. What I'm gonna tell you is, I kind of disagree with that. Like, my point of view is, actually the pace of change that we have right now is probably the fastest we've ever seen, and it's probably the slowest we'll ever see, right? And so change is the new normal. Right? And there's a famous quote that Jack Welch says, and I think it's more relevant today than maybe it even was when he said it. But he said, if the rate of change inside your company is slower than the rate of change outside your company, you're dying. Right? And his point is, if you can't innovate faster than what's happening outside of your company, or maybe he said the end is near. I don't remember exactly how he finished it, but you get the point. Right? So here's what I'm going to say. We have to innovate. It's a mandatory. Right? And I think sometimes when I think about how do you want to innovate, where do you want to transform to, for Pizza Hut, it's like, how do we go back to the things that made us great? You know, other folks that I talk to, maybe they're on a new brand that's starting up, and then I would say, hey, go find the people who love your brand and understand why, and how do you innovate at those things? But what is true in any brand that's winning is that they're always transforming. And I would push all of you guys to think about, what are brands that you love? Right, and this I'm going to give you one of my stories, Nike, right? It's a brand that I love, gave me a reason to wear sneakers today. Think about that brand. It's a brand that's been around for a long time. It's constantly innovated. It's probably more relevant in culture today than it's ever been. And we can all do that if we stay in touch with the culture that we're playing in, if we stay in touch with what are our points of difference, and we innovate against them. So that is what we're going to go to and talk about for Pizza Hut. So you can imagine, for me, I stepped into this role in December of 2019, and I came over, I had been working at KFC for a while, and I came over to Pizza Hut, and I was like, what are we gonna transform to? And I immediately spent some time with our franchisees, and they said, hey, we've been around for a really long time, don't screw it up, right? Was kind of their message to me, and I'm like, I feel really blessed to be getting to have a chance to steward this iconic brand for a period of time, but what are we gonna transform to? Where do we wanna go? And so the first thing that we spent some time doing together was, let's go back to the roots. Let's go back to the things that make Pizza Hut really special. Why do people love this brand, right? And so the first thing that I did is I went to Wichita, Kansas, where the first Pizza Hut was, and that you can see that in the top right picture. That's the original Pizza Hut. It's now on the campus of Wichita State University, and it's a museum, and you can see some pictures from there. And I spent time talking with franchisees. I spent time looking back through the archives. So what I learned from that was, there's Pizza Hut really at its core, what made it really special was really clear, right? It was all about, when it was founded, craveable food. It was all about winning in food, and that's good because we're a restaurant brand, so we should win on food. It was about being in culture. People talked about the brand. It was about being the innovator. And it was about having hospitality, winning experiences, right? And maybe what hospitality looks like today is different than what it looked like then, but at the core of it are those four things. So we came back and we said, this is the winning combination. This is where we have to go. It's about winning food, right? Let's be the innovator. Let's have the most craveable food. We have to win on food. It's about being in culture, not the same culture we were in, but the new version of culture. What is that? People should talk about us, right? And then we have to have winning experiences. Maybe not in the dining room like it was in that original video, but how do we have winning experiences, both digitally and in our new physical spaces, right? So we're gonna talk a little bit about how we did that. But this was the recipe, right? So Lindsay, I'm gonna kick it to you to talk about how we start to bring that to life, and then we'll talk through kind of some principles of the transformation.
Okay, so David gave us the winning lotto numbers. This is what we need to do to reignite our brand. And so we wanted to make sure that came through in every single customer touch point. And I think as the leader of our marketing organization, a lot of times people think, okay, well, it's marketing's job to steward the brand. But it's really everyone's job to steward the brand, because this was talked about a little earlier today, but what makes up your experiences is so many different things. It's the food, it's the people, it's how you access it. So starting with the first thing we said, we want to make sure that our digital experience is bar none. It's great, it's modern, and it removes some of the friction. The other way to think about this at RestaurantSpaces is our digital experience is actually our largest storefront. Over 60% of our customers come through our app or our website, so that makes this our largest storefront. So how do we make sure that when people are coming through that they are able to transact, they're able to buy what they want, we remember what they're doing, we serve them up in our loyalty program, and we just make sure that that is a fully functioning cycle. The second point is restaurant design. And as we said, digital experience is your largest storefront, and I'm gonna say restaurant design is our biggest marketing point. So we have 5,500 restaurants. So there's a lot of restaurants out there, and how we show up to our customers in those restaurants really seals their experience with us. Does it feel modern? Is it easy? So restaurant design, number 2. Number 3, brand. So how our brand is coming through in all of our touch points. One thing that's really hard in the restaurant space, there's a lot of competition. And we want to make sure that every single time our brand shows up, that it's not just pizza, but it's Pizza Hut. So how do we make sure that we're not promoting the category, but it's unique, it's ownable, it's really specific to our brand? And like David mentioned, change is happening really fast, and it's a great opportunity for us to say what is relevant for today's customer and how do we serve that up across every single experience. So we also talked earlier about how different organizations can be a little siloed. So you're working on restaurant design, this other person's working on the CX experience. How do we make sure that everything's laddering up to what that brand really wants to be? And we summarize this to say it's one question that everyone can get behind. Why would a pizza lover love this? So this is more than just a communication strategy for us. It's a filter. So everybody who's working on the brand should know, does this pay off why a pizza lover would love this or not? So if it doesn't pay off that in our customer innovation, that's probably not the right product for us. If it's not paying off that in the best experience with the restaurant, or a digital experience is not living up to why a pizza lover would love this, that means it's probably not for us. And this also helps where you don't want everything coming through one select small group of leaders. You want everybody to feel like they're empowered to be those marketers, be the brand touch point, and make the best decision for your brand.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about some principles for transformation. We'll start to bring these to life, but I want to phrase these in kind of 5 questions because I think it's a pretty broad term, like how do you transform? We'll talk about the Pizza Hut transformation. But as Lindsay said, like fueling the brand promise is everyone's job. You've got to know what your brand stands for. You got to pay it off every single time. It can't exist in silos. And so I think if you can have these kind of sets of questions, and I think these are 5 questions that we think about, they're 5 questions I think you guys should all be thinking about. They'll apply to kind of any transformation situation. And we should all be transforming, all right? So I'm gonna start with the first one. I'm gonna let Lindsay take a couple. The first one is everyone craving change, right? And so I saw some head nods. I don't think I have to sell this group on the need to transform. I heard that earlier. But I think there's kind of 2 components to change, right? The first is, what are you trying to change towards? Like, where are you going? So we talked about this North Star earlier, and the other one is, how are you gonna do it, right? So the first one is, where are you going? And it's really important to be able to articulate what is your vision or strategy. So Lindsay talked about, why would a pizza lover love this? I talked about winning food, being in culture, winning experiences. The thing I'll tell you about this is the change that we're talking about right now, they are big changes, right? So if it's a big change, most people probably aren't going to understand it straight out of the gate, right? So if you're talking about the change that you need to make and everybody is, oh yeah, I got it, it's probably not big enough, right? If you are talking about the change you need to make and everybody's, I'm not sure, you probably need to spend more time on it. But the key thing is you've got to define where you want to go, and then you've got to spend some time really bringing people along, right? Investing, building this group of advocates that are going to help drive that change for you. Because change is really hard, and I think someone up here talked earlier about how there's kind of some push-pull, and you've got to be clear about who's going to be the group that helps drive that change for you. To do that, you start with being clear on your vision. So for us, there was a couple specific work streams we wanted to go after to kind of start to realize our overall vision. One was, how do we become a digital-first operator? right? So we want to be a restaurant brand powered by technology. We want to be a digital first operator. The second is, how do we become a younger, more everyday brand across everything that we do, across every touch point, to win the next generation of pizza lovers? So we started to talk about those things, right? Then people ask, why is that important? Or inevitably, like, why do I need to do that? For us, one example, the case for change was, hey, before COVID, and I'll just give you this data point, 70% of food that got delivered was pizza, right? After COVID, so call it now and around now, 2021, 2022, about 40% of food that gets delivered is pizza. What's interesting about that is we still deliver about the same amount of pizza. So, if you're the half glass empty person, you would say, that's a lot of risk. People are coming for our core business. If you're the half glass full person, you would say, there's a huge opportunity here. Like, how are we going to go win the rest of this delivery business that we didn't currently have access to before? But the key part in that is, like, when you start to talk about that case for change, everybody's like, we're going to have to do something about this, because who's actually driving this change? It's the young people. It's the people that we want to go get. So what are we going to do about this? How are we going to win in this new place? And then you build those advocates and you start to drive that. Okay, Lindsay, I'm going to let you take the next couple.
Okay. So the second question is the soul of your brand. Is that your North Star? So I think brands are a lot like people, and it's good to be good at what you are and who you really are, your core DNA. It's hard if you're trying to compete at what everyone else is doing and you're just kind of competing in that different area. So David asked this earlier, but when I talk to people and I say I work at Pizza Hut, they almost always give me a really great story. They talk about stuffed crust or going to our buffets. I chatted with a few of you guys at lunch, and you mentioned some of those great memories that you had with the brand. And so we did just that when we wanted to say, what does our brand stand for? We went and talked to our customers, and we said, hey, why is it that you love our brand? And there was a lot of things that are just category touch points, price, ease, things like that. But when they were talking about the brand, and they had these really great emotive stories of Friday nights with their family and Little League and things like that, no one's really talking about that in our category. So we said, that's what makes our brand special. How do we bring that front and center? And the joke I was gonna say, but David beat me to the punch, was that if you didn't raise your hand, get up and leave, because this is just for pizza lovers. So the trick here, though, is a lot of times if your brand is a legacy brand or heritage brand, which a lot of you guys here are, sometimes you hit resistance where people are like, oh, we don't want to feel dated. We don't want to feel old. And the thing about that, though, is you can still have those great memory structures. The trick is just to bring it to life in a really modern way. So how do we dust off this hospitality, this warmth that was about our brand when people are getting together over great food, but now maybe they're getting together and it looks a little bit different. They're getting together with friends, maybe it's on the go, maybe it's not in our dining room, maybe it's in their dining room. So how do we make sure that that's really coming through in our brand and being really true to ourselves? So we wanted to dive in and say, what are the three areas for our brand to be a modern pizza lover and not necessarily this legacy look back pizza lover? So the first piece we talked about was becoming the unofficial pizza of pop culture. And that's really interesting if you unpack it, because the unofficial pizza of pop culture doesn't mean it's like tons of celebrity deals or massive partnerships where that's what pop culture looks like. Pop culture is different than it was before, when Pizza Hut was at its heyday in the 90s and we were sending pizza to space and they were in Wayne's World and all these movie integrations. That's not necessarily what culture looks like now. TikTok's the fastest growing digital platform. So a lot of people are there. Things are behind the scenes. Things are real time, instant. So how do we get on these new medias where new customers are going to be? Because I think one thing that's really interesting is if you want to grow your customer base, you have to be places that new customers are. And sometimes organizations can be a little resistant to that. The second point is, if we're going to be the brand for pizza lovers, all of our products have to come off as really craveable and delicious. So one of the things we say internally is that it needs to be lick the screen. Like, the product just needs to look really great and delicious and craveable. What we say is it's like the best version of user-generated content. Maybe it could be in your social feed, you could be hanging out with your friends, but it looks delicious every single time. And the third point, which is obviously my favorite point as the marketer in the room, is that your communications need to be distinct and relevant. And so we've talked a little bit about being modern, being more everyday, and dialing in on that relevancy. So relevancy and distinction kind of work opposite to each other. If you're relevant, I want to be what's cool right now. I want to connect with customers on what they're talking about right now. The hard part about that is if everyone's doing that, you fall into that same category trap where it sounds like everything else. I said this earlier, but for brands, being generic is the enemy of branding. So when people say, I really feel like getting McDonald's fries, or maybe we'll just get just pizza tonight, I'm like, oh, don't do that. Get Pizza Hut tonight. So you want to balance being relevancy, and you also want to make sure that it feels really distinct and ownable. So every single time it comes across as your brand. And so I talked earlier about our digital footprint being our largest storefront. So you can see a little bit of this journey and a look back from our brand and how we've modernized that over time. A lot of this stuff is like in the category too, where it's hard to necessarily remember us for those things. So we're ending in this place where it feels more natural, it feels more authentic, but the food still looks really great. Being natural and authentic can feel less staged, but we want to make sure the food really shines there too. So when we also talked about the modern and everyday customer, we want to make sure we're showing up in that way. And that's across everything from our packaging to the talent that we're shooting in our food ads to just every single touch point. It needs to feel special and different and ownable to your brand. So one tangible thing that we did is we reverted back to our old classic logo. If our red roof is one of our most distinct assets and it's something that people really know from our brand, how do we make sure that we bring that front and center again? And what we heard internally was like, oh, we don't want to go back to that. It feels old. That was from before. But if it's surrounded in a modern way, it doesn't come across like that. I got one head nod, so I'm going to accept it. So the thing here is just paying off your brand every single time and every single touch point and making sure that it's firing against that true North Star. Another thing we're talking about, and I had a side conversation with, I think, the next speaker, is that we talked about, are you speaking to someone or are you speaking to everyone? And I'll just do a quick show of hands. Like at Pizza Hut, when I started, we said our customer is 18 to 65 years old. So who in the restaurant space says that's your customer, 18 to 65 years old? Raise your hand. Oh, cool, I should be dominating then. So the trick is you want to make sure that you're not speaking to everyone, because if you're boiling it down to the common denominator of every adult who buys restaurant food, then it can come back down to those category points and not necessarily what makes your brand special. And I would say the one key takeaway here is being really focused, making sure that your brand has a clear point of view, and that point of view might not be okay for every single person. We also talk a lot internally, and David does a really great job of advocating for change and being progressive with the brand, is that a lot of times we worry, like, will this alienate our current customers? And we can't be scared to move our brand forward. So the fourth question is innovation on your points of difference. So if we know what makes our brand special and different and things that we can own, how do we continue to generate news in that space and not necessarily stand still? So a great example for our brand is gaming. So a lot of you said you grew up with the brand, maybe you went to the dining room and you played Pac-Man games there. It was a great tabletop experience. So we partnered with Pac-Man and said, how can we dust that memory structure off and do it in a way that still feels like us, but feels modern and relevant for today's customer? So we wanted to take the gameplay from our dining room and bring it to our customer's dining room. So we did this by changing our packaging and making it an AR arcade game. So luckily customers were getting used to the QR code. You could scan it on your phone to get your menus in stores, and so we knew this was a natural behavior. So at the front of the box, instead of a quarter, you scan the QR code and you could play Pac-Man. Equipped with a leaderboard, you could share on social, your initials, so everyone knew that you were the game champion. But one story I always love to tell is that when we were testing this and making sure it worked on our packaging, the girl who helps run our packaging, who's a delight, she said, I think there's something wrong with this Pac-Man game because the ghosts keep getting faster every single level. I was like, you're doing better than me, I'm still on level 1. But that's the game. And so we wanted to say, this is an older iconic memory, but it's brought to life in a new and different way. So this kind of gets back to the point of you want to be the best version of yourself. So we're embracing gaming in a way that still feels right for us, but feels relevant for today. So I'll leave it to David on our last question.
Close us out. So last thing I will talk about here is, do you have a plan to deliver value quickly, right? And I'm sure all of you guys deal with this. So what I'll tell you is one thing as a leader I really struggle with. is when I hear about, hey, I got this great idea, it's gonna take 36 months, and when we get to the end of the 36 months, it's gonna be amazing.
I tried it. He didn't like it.
It doesn't go well, right? And you know who gets less excited about that? I don't know if you work with franchisees or investors, they get even less excited about that. So the thing is, how are you gonna have constant gains, make gains along the way, right? But then ultimately get to this endpoint that's really glorious, the one that you wanna get to. And it's gotta be an and, it can't be an or, right? And so what I think about is like, hey, big, hard things, they take a lot of time. So you're gonna have to find a way to make incremental gains along the way. So one of the things that I always say is, hey, chase the strategy, not the technology. Like, where are you trying to get to? And how do you make gains along the way? And one of the things that we did at Pizza Hut, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Agile. Who does anybody in here work in Agile? There's a few hands that go up, right? But I think this is gonna be an important principle for all of us to figure out in the restaurant space more and more, and not just in tech. So Agile really arose in tech for this reason, right? Speed to market, highly volatile space. How do I de-risk outcomes because they're really expensive? We actually moved a big part of our company to operate in Agile. All right, and we're starting to organize more and more around outcomes, because what that allows us to do is like do big change, but manage a backlog and get wins all along the way as we get to that big change. I think that's gonna be a bigger and bigger thing that we have to do. And I'll just give you a couple quick examples of this as we close out. So, you know, one of the things that we have is we have a big delivery fulfillment experience that we want to go build, right? And it's all in service of this being a digital first operator, which I talked about earlier. So we have a vision about where we want to go, how we want to reinvent the delivery experience. You know, we're rolling it out in phases. So if you see the stuff that's come out, we've actually built this vision back in early 2020, right? When the pandemic started. We started with, hey, let's roll out contactless delivery and curbside. That was not really on the initial plan, but obviously the environment necessitated it, so we were agile, we moved towards that. But then you see the Hut Lane come out. We launched a digital-only pickup window, which is starting to elevate the fulfillment experience. Then we rolled out AI in the back of house that does production sequencing, which allows us to have a better delivery experience and make it easier for our team members to deliver hot pizzas. So we're rolling that out now. Then we fully embedded aggregators and third-party delivery and put that into our technology in the back of the house. So each of these things makes the experience a little bit better, right? And each of them feel like we're making improvements. And then we ultimately get to an endpoint down the road, which we're nowhere near yet, which is a broader vision of where we want to go. So chase the strategy, not the technology. The other thing that that does for you is it allows you to be flexible, right? Because the environment that we're operating in today, like what you think the outcome you need might not be the outcome that you need in 2 years. And so it's letting you kind of de-risk that and continue to progress as you go, right? And then the last thing I'll just say as we close this out is, I get asked a lot of questions about development. Where are we going? What are we gonna do with our physical space? Look, it's probably a longer conversation, a whole separate presentation, but inevitably, right, we see smaller footprints, Delcos, Delco-led delivery. That's becoming more and more of what we need to do, right? But why is that becoming more and more of what we need to do? Because that's what the guest wants, right? There's certain places where dine-in is really important. We're gonna continue to have amazing dine-in assets. So it's not a one size fits all, but it's about chasing the guest experience and delivering that winning experience. So, and then we're building this restaurant brand that's powered by technology. So just to close us out, and love to spend some more time talking with you guys about this. I just later this evening or after this, I would just want to say thank you for having us. You know, couple points of just encouragement for you, because we're operating in a really special time in the restaurant industry where the industry is changing around us. And we have a chance to really shape that, everyone in this room. Change is the new normal, right? That's what it's gonna be. And it's only gonna get faster. This is probably gonna be the slowest pace of change we ever see, which is hard to think about. And so, you know, chase the strategy. Don't chase the technology. You have all this stuff coming at you. Don't chase the tactic. Think about where you're going and use those as a tool to get to your endpoint. Get those small wins along the way. I had a franchisee who used to say to me, hey, if we're gonna rob the bank, let's knock off some gas stations along the way. So maybe that's the right way to phrase it, right? Define the North Star, like know what that endpoint is. That's actually the hard part. Like if you get that right and you get everyone to buy into that, actually the transformation becomes a lot easier. So know the North Star and the transformation will get a lot easier. So thank you so much for having us. I look forward to spending some more time with you guys this evening, but it's absolutely a pleasure. And Jason, I'll kick it back to you.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, Lindsay Morgan and David Graves, thank you so much.